Shy fan spills coffee on her fave superstar. Weeks later, he shows up at her job. The coffee was already doomed before Lila Grant even picked up the cup. She should have seen the signs. The wobbling tower of books she'd stacked too high, the napkin covered in her frantic scribbling balanced precariously on top, and her phone buzzing with yet another rejection email from a production company. But Lila had exactly 7 minutes left on her break, and if she didn't finish rewriting her resume right now, she'd never have the courage to submit it to that new internship posting. "Large vanilla latte with oat milk for Marcus," she called out, one hand gripping the coffee cup while the other clutched her makeshift resume. The napkin was a mess of crossed-out lines and cramped handwriting, but buried between the coffee rings were 3 solid log lines she'd been perfecting for months. "Dreaming loud, even when it's on napkins," she'd written at the bottom, a little reminder to herself that maybe, just maybe, someone would notice her work someday. The bell above the cafe door chimed, and Lila glanced up from her napkin resume. Her heart stopped. Reed Mason stood in the doorway of Pages and Pour, pulling off a pair of sunglasses and running a hand through his messy brown hair. Not Reed Mason the movie poster, but actual, breathing, here in her tiny bookstore cafe Reed Mason. The same guy whose indie films had gotten her through her worst college nights, whose interviews she'd watched religiously, whose authentic, raw performances had inspired her to keep writing when everyone told her Hollywood was impossible. And he was walking straight toward her counter. Lila's brain short-circuited. Move, she told herself. Say something professional. Act normal. Instead, she stood frozen, clutching Marcus's latte and her napkin resume like they were life preservers. "Hi," Reed said, and his voice was exactly like it sounded in movies, warm, a little gravelly. "Could I get a black coffee? Large?" "Yes. Absolutely. Black coffee. Large black coffee." The words tumbled out like marbles from a jar. "Coming right up, Mr. Mason. Sorry, just coffee." He smiled, and Lila felt her cheeks burn. He probably got recognized everywhere, probably had fans who at least managed to form complete sentences. She spun toward the espresso machine, napkin still in hand, and that's when everything went sideways. Her elbow caught the edge of the book tower, sending novels cascading across the counter. She lunged to catch them, forgetting about Marcus's latte in her other hand. The coffee cup flew in a perfect arc through the air. Time slowed as Lila watched 16 ounces of vanilla oat milk latte sail directly toward Reed Mason's chest, landing with a spectacular splash across his gray hoodie. "Oh God. Oh no. I'm so sorry." Lila grabbed the first napkin she could find, her resume napkin, and thrust it toward him. "I'm such a disaster, I can't believe this is so embarrassing." Reed looked down at his coffee-soaked hoodie, then at Lila's mortified face, and started laughing. Not the polite chuckle she expected, but genuine, surprised laughter. "Hey, it's okay," he said, taking the napkin from her trembling hands. "Really. These things happen. But your hoodie will survive." He dabbed at the coffee stain, and Lila noticed him glancing at the napkin. His eyebrows raised slightly as he took in her scribbled notes. "This yours?" Lila wanted to disappear into the floor. "It's nothing. Just notes." Reed folded the napkin carefully, coffee stain and all, and slipped it into his pocket. "Don't worry about the hoodie. But you might want to invest in a proper notebook." He winked, left a 20 on the counter, and walked out of Pages and Pour, leaving Lila standing in a puddle of spilled coffee and shattered dignity. She had no idea that napkin was about to change everything. 3 days later, Lila had almost convinced herself it never happened. Almost. She'd replayed the scene approximately 200 times, each replay making her cringe deeper into her oversized cardigan. The way she'd stammered. The way she'd thrown coffee at Reed Mason like some kind of caffeinated weapon. The way she'd handed him her pathetic napkin resume like it was some precious document instead of scribbled desperation. "At least no one filmed it," she muttered to herself, sliding another romance novel onto the shelf. The afternoon crowd at Pages and Pour was thin, just Mrs. Henderson browsing poetry and a college student camping out with her laptop. Lila's phone buzzed. Another rejection email, this one from a small streaming service. Thanks for your submission, but we're looking for more experienced writers at this time. She'd gotten 17 rejections in the past month. 17 polite ways of saying not good enough. Maybe her mom was right. Maybe she should consider that teaching job back in Ohio, stop chasing impossible dreams in a city that seemed determined to crush them. That night she sat at her tiny kitchen table with her laptop, staring at a half-finished pilot script. The cursor blinked mockingly at her. She closed the laptop and went to bed early, wondering if she'd ever write anything worth reading. 2,000 miles away, Reed Mason was finally unpacking the last of his suitcases from the Portland Film Festival. The indie movie he premiered there had gotten decent reviews, but Reed felt restless, like he was going through the motions of a career instead of living it. He pulled out the coffee-stained hoodie, now dry but permanently marked with vanilla latte. As he tossed it toward the laundry hamper, something crinkled in the front pocket. The napkin? Reed had completely forgotten about it. He unfolded the wrinkled paper, expecting maybe a phone number or grocery list. Instead, he found himself staring at the most cramped, passionate writing he'd seen in years. In tiny letters squeezed between coffee rings were 3 log lines. After her twin disappears, a woman discovers they've been living each other's lives in alternate realities. A has-been magician's retirement home becomes ground zero for actual supernatural events. 2 rival food truck owners are forced to share a kitchen after a citywide blackout. Beneath those were character sketches, just fragments, but they crackled with authenticity. A dialogue sample that made Reed smile despite himself. And at the very bottom, in handwriting so small he had to squint, "Dreaming loud, even when it's on napkins." Reed set the napkin on his kitchen counter and stared at it. There was something raw here, something real that he hadn't encountered in months of polished Hollywood pitches. His phone rang. "Reed, thank God," came the voice of his producer, Jennifer Parks. "We're dying over here. This new series, Crossroads, we've got amazing leads, killer concept, but the supporting character feels flat. Every writer we've tried makes her sound like she stepped out of a manual. We need someone who understands real people, you know? Someone with an actual voice." Reed's eyes drifted back to the napkin. "Jen," he said slowly, "what if I told you I might know someone?" 3 weeks later, Lila had developed a system for surviving her shifts at Pages and Pour, keep her head down, focus on the books, and pretend the counter where she'd humiliated herself didn't exist. It was working surprisingly well. She was reshelving the mystery section when the bell chimed, but she didn't look up. Tuesday afternoons were usually quiet, just regulars who knew exactly what they wanted and tourists browsing the local author's display. "Excuse me," came a familiar voice behind her. "Do you happen to have anything by emerging screenwriters?" Lila's heart stopped. She turned around slowly, clutching a paperback thriller like a shield. Reed Mason stood 3 feet away, wearing a clean navy hoodie and that same warm smile. No sunglasses this time, no attempt to hide. He looked like he belonged there, like he'd been planning this visit for weeks. "Hi," Lila managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hi yourself." Reed's smile widened. "You look like you've seen a ghost." What are you doing here?" The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "I mean, welcome to Pages and Pour. Can I help you find something?" Reed chuckled and reached into his pocket. Lila's face went white as he pulled out a familiar, crumpled napkin, her napkin, still stained with vanilla latte. "You still writing on these?" he asked, holding it up. Lila felt the blood drain from her face. "Oh God. You kept that? I'm so embarrassed." "Don't be." Reed's voice was serious now, gentler. "This little napkin has been sitting on my kitchen counter for 3 weeks. You want to know why?" Lila nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Because you're writing, these log lines, these character sketches, they have something I haven't seen in months of Hollywood meetings. Heart. Authenticity. A voice that doesn't sound like it came from a computer." He unfolded the napkin carefully. "This line here, dreaming loud, Even when it's on napkins. That's not just writing. That's belief. Lila's eyes filled with tears. She'd never heard anyone talk about her work like that. I have a producer friend, Reed continued. She's working on a limited series called Crossroads. They need someone to develop dialogue for a supporting character, nothing huge, just a freelance assignment. One character's story arc across a few scenes. Lila stared at him. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance. Reed folded the napkin and handed it back to her. No pressure, no guarantees. Just an opportunity for someone with a real voice to be heard. What do you say? The bookstore seemed to spin around her. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her, people who wrote resumes on napkins and spilled coffee on movie stars. But Reed was still standing there, still smiling, still holding out her crumpled dreams like they were worth something. Yes, she whispered, then cleared her throat. Yes. I'd love to try. Reed's grin was infectious. Perfect. I'll have Jen send you the details tomorrow. As he headed toward the door, he called back. And Lila? Invest in a proper notebook. But don't change that voice. The email from Jennifer Parks arrived at 6:47 a.m. the next morning, containing a character breakdown, 3 scenes, and the most terrifying opportunity of Lila's life. Maya Chen's supporting character, episodes 4 to 6. Current dialogue feels stilted. Needs someone who can make her sound like a real person facing impossible choices. Lila read the character description 15 times. Maya was a social worker whose brother had vanished, leaving behind only cryptic messages about crossing over. The existing dialogue made her sound like she was reading from a manual about grief. For the first time in months, Lila called in sick to work. She spread the script across her kitchen table next to her brand new notebook, the first real writing supplies she'd bought in years. The scenes showed Maya at different breaking points, confronting her brother's empty apartment, fighting with their parents about calling off the search, and finally deciding to follow his trail despite everyone's warnings. But the words were all wrong. Maya sounded like every other concerned sister character Lila had seen in a dozen shows. Clinical. Detached. Safe. Lila closed her eyes and thought about her own brother Jake, who'd struggled with depression through college. She remembered the helpless fury of watching someone you loved disappear piece by piece, the way you'd bargain with the universe for just one real conversation. Her pen moved across the notebook. Maya, don't you dare tell me to. Give him space. Space is what he had when he stopped answering my calls. Space is what he had when he missed Mom's birthday. I gave him space, and now he's gone. The dialogue poured out of her, raw, messy, and completely honest. Maya stopped sounding like a plot device and started sounding like a woman whose world was falling apart. Lila worked for 14 hours straight, barely stopping to eat. Every word felt like it mattered, like someone was finally going to hear what she had to say. She submitted the revised scenes at 2 a.m., then spent the next 3 days checking her email obsessively. Reed's response came on Thursday. This is exactly what we needed. Jen wants to schedule a call. But it was his follow-up message that made Lila's hands shake. Don't change your voice. That's what we're buying. The call with Jennifer Parks lasted 45 minutes. I've been in this business for 20 years, Jen said, and I haven't read dialogue this authentic in ages. Maya finally sounds like she exists. 2 days later, Reed called personally. Words spreading around the production office, he said, and Lila could hear the smile in his voice. The director read your Maya scenes out loud in the writer's room. Everyone went quiet. That's never happened before. Really? Really? And Lila? Jen's already asking if you're available for episodes 7 and 8. Different character, bigger arc. They want more of whatever you're doing. Lila stared at her notebook, filled with crossouts and coffee rings and the most honest writing she'd ever done. I'm available, she said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. For the first time in years, she wasn't writing on napkins anymore. She was writing for people who believed her words were worth something. 1 month later, Lila was reorganizing the poetry section when she spotted the familiar navy hoodie through the window. This time, she didn't freeze. She didn't panic. She simply smiled and waited for Reed Mason to walk through the door of Pages and pour like he'd done it 100 times before. "Coffee's on me today," she called out as he approached the counter. "I owe you about 16 ounces of vanilla latte." Reed laughed, that same warm sound that had surprised her all those weeks ago. "I'll take you up on that. But I'm not here for coffee." "No?" He pulled out his phone and showed her an email. The subject line read, "Crossroads Episodes 9 to 10 Writer Credit, Lila Grant." "Your name," Reed said, grinning at her shocked expression. "On the actual script?" Jen insisted. Said any writer who could make 3 seasoned actors cry during a table read deserved proper credit. Lila's hands shook as she read the email. Her name. Right there in official Hollywood letters. Not additional dialogue or script consultant. Writer. "I can't believe this is real," she whispered. "It's real." "And Lila?" Reed's voice grew serious. "I need to thank you?" "Thank me? For what?" "For reminding me why I started acting in the first place." He leaned against the counter, his eyes bright. "I got into this business because I loved stories that felt true, characters that felt human. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. Your writing, Maya's grief, her anger, the way she talks to her parents, it's all so genuine. Working with your scripts reminded me what good storytelling looks like." Lila felt tears prick her eyes. "You changed my life with that napkin. You changed your own life." I just happened to be holding the napkin. Through the cafe window, Lila could see her reflection, same oversized cardigan, same messy ponytail, but something in her posture had shifted. She stood straighter now, like someone who belonged in her own skin. Her phone buzzed with a Slack notification from the Crossroads writer's room. Tomorrow she'd spend her morning writing dialogue for episode 10, then come to the cafe for her afternoon shift. It wasn't the traditional path she'd imagined, but it was hers. "I still can't quite believe it," she said, watching Reed prepare to leave. "Sometimes I wake up thinking I dreamed the whole thing." "Well, if you did dream it," Reed said, heading for the door, "don't wake up." After he left, Lila returned to shelving poetry books, but her mind was 3,000 miles away in a Los Angeles sound stage where actors were bringing her words to life. Characters she'd created from heartbreak and hope were becoming real, their voices echoing through studios and into living rooms across America. She pulled out her notebook, the good one now, with the sturdy binding, and jotted down a character idea for next week's pitch. No more napkins. No more dreaming in secret. Just stories worth telling, finally